Continuing on with our discussion of the different types of relationships, when we were talking about predation, we do have another type of predation that's kind of specific to plants because there's a little bit of difference between animal interaction and animal-plant interaction. So we call that herbivory. Herbivory is a positive-negative interaction just like the other types of predation are, and it refers to the interaction in which an herbivore eats plants or parts of a plant or algae in some way. It's led to the evolution of plant mechanical and chemical defenses and adaptations as well. So there's even an arms race between plants and animals. I think there should be an E right here. Let me see if I can fix that. So there's even an evolutionary arms race between plants and animals because plants have developed various chemicals and various mechanical defense mechanisms like thorns and the like, all in an effort to keep from being eaten by various types of herbivores. So when you look at, say, a particular plant that puts out kind of a noxious odor, or maybe there are certain plants that are very distasteful, well, that is part of this whole defense mechanism. Or if you look at a rose and the thorns of a rose, or you look at the spiny little needles on a bull nettle or something like that, those are all defensive mechanisms to try to avoid being eaten by various other creatures. So that would be herbivory, and that is just an additional particular type of relationship between a plant and animal that fall into the same category of predation, like a bear eating the salmon that we saw. I love this example in the textbook of herbivory, which is of course the type of predation between an herbivore and a plant, just because it's so unusual. You have this manatee, this West Indies manatee down in Florida eating this seaweed or algae material that he finds down there. Some of these creatures are called sea cows because they are basically giant underwater cows that graze on the various plants that live underneath the water there. So a great example here of herbivory, which is a positive-negative relationship and interaction between two different living creatures. You have the manatee, who's definitely benefiting, and then you have this particular underwater plant who's definitely not benefiting from this particular relationship. So let's kind of move on to other relationships. This is one that is always interesting to students. You start studying this back in elementary school, and so you've probably heard all these terms before. This is called symbiosis. Symbiosis is a relationship where two or more species live in pretty close, direct, intimate contact with one another. Here you have a classic example of a crocodile and a plover. And the plover is this little bird here. They have this relationship where this bird actually goes into the mouth of the crocodile and picks away little bits of food and gunk that grows in between the crocodile's teeth. So there's kind of like this unwritten rule that the crocodile is not going to just snap his jaws shut and eat the little bird. How they develop this relationship over time is fascinating. I can't believe that this relationship even exists out there in the natural world, but sure enough, for the most part, it's pretty rare to actually see or catch a crocodile chomping down on one of these little birds. The birds go in, they pick away at debris and food and particularly parasites and things of that nature, and the crocodile allows for that to occur. In this case, they're both benefiting from that relationship, but symbiosis is not always a win-win. So we'll take a look at some of the different examples. One of the first examples is definitely not a win-win. It's a positive-negative type of relationship. It's called parasitism. Parasitism is when one organism, the parasite, is getting its nourishment, its nutrition, deriving what it needs to survive from another organism called the host. And great examples of this would be like a flea living on your dog, or a tick that is attached to you after a walk through the woods. Those are examples of parasitism. Even in the plant world, you can find parasitism, like if you think about the mistletoe that's hung at a doorway during Christmas time. Well, that is a parasite. That mistletoe grows on other trees and actually derives its nutrition and water from those other trees, and it actually has a negative effect on those trees. So the host is going to be the one that is harmed. The parasite is the one that is getting the positive benefit of this relationship. Parasites that live within the body of their host are called endoparasites. So think about tapeworms or other creatures that live inside the intestines of a creature. And then parasites that live on the external surface are called ectoparasites. So like the fleas that might live on your dog would be ectoparasites, and the tapeworms that might live inside your dog's stomach would be endoparasites. Many parasites have a pretty complex life system, a reproductive system, a life cycle that involves numerous different hosts. Like they don't only stay with one host or live or complete their life cycle within that one host. Some parasites have to have different hosts for different stages within their life. Some parasites change the behavior of the host in a way that increases the parasite's fitness. One of the craziest examples of this, which just seems unimaginable, it seems like a movie or a fake sci-fi novel, is the zombie ant fungus. And you can find more information by clicking on this Wikipedia article right here. But you can see an example of this, and it's this crazy story. I highly encourage you to go to the internet and look up zombie ant fungus, or just click on the link here, where this fungus actually takes over this ant and begins to grow inside of the ant and affects the way the ant behaves. And toward the end of its life, it causes the ant to seek out a particular spot and clamp down on the vein of a leaf with its jaws, and then the fungus will poke through the ant's head. The ant dies. It provides the fruiting bodies, and the spores are released to infect other ants. So in effect, this fungus is taking over the mind and body of this ant and causing it to do what best benefits the fungus. It's pretty crazy. So go take a look. Lots of information on the internet about that. It's a well-known phenomenon, a well-known example of parasitism. Moving away from ant zombie fungus, let's go to something a little bit more positive. Let's talk about mutualism. Mutualism is a symbiosis where it's a win-win, a positive. It's an interspecific interaction that benefits both species. And mutualism can be obligate, where one species cannot survive without the other. A good example of that would be, say, for let's see, the creatures that eat wood. Termites have the ability to digest wood, but really what digests the wood is the bacteria that lives inside their gut, and they are obligate. The termites are obligate to those particular bacteria that live inside their gut. The termites could not feed on the wood and survive without the bacteria that live inside of them. So that's mutualism. They're both benefiting from that relationship, but it's obligate mutualism. The opposite side of the coin there would be facultative. Facultative is where both species can survive alone, but they're still getting a benefit. And that would be like the plover and the crocodile. They don't have to have each other to survive. The bird and the crocodile can live apart, and they do, but in that relationship they both benefit when they are together and they are sharing that particular type of relationship. Another great example of facultative mutualism is a clownfish and a sea anemone. If you've ever seen Finding Nemo, you're probably familiar with the fact that clownfish live among sea anemones, and they actually both benefit from that. The clownfish gets protection and a place to hide from predators, and the sea anemone tends to get the leftover food and bits that the clownfish brings back and feeds on. So they have a beneficial relationship. They don't have to have each other, but they are both benefiting from that relationship. Another good example of a type of mutualism is between this tree called the acacia tree and these ants. And what's really cool is these ants live in the tree, and they live off of material that the tree provides, and in return these ants are very territorial, and what they do is they clear out other vegetation around the plant. So this tree gets benefited because it has fewer competitors right around it, and the ants kind of keep away even other creatures that might eat on the plant. So if you are, say, some sort of antelope, and you come along and you see this tree and you think, all right, I'm going to feed on some of these leaves, and you go in to start taking bites off the leaves, and suddenly ants start crawling on you and on your tongue and in your mouth, you're probably going to learn to avoid this particular tree. So both the ant and the tree benefit from this relationship, this mutualism that they have. There's more information about that there in your textbook, or again, if you want to look on the internet about ants and acacia trees, a pretty fascinating relationship that they have. One last form of mutualism we want to mention is called commensalism. Commensalism is a positive neutral interaction. So we denote that with a positive and then just a zero. Zero means neutral. It's not good or bad. It's not harmful or helpful either way. One species benefits and the other one is neither harmed nor helped. So for example, if we think back about the crab and the sea urchin, that might be commensalism. We might have to study it to be sure, but the crab is definitely getting a benefit, and perhaps the sea anemone is not helped or hurt. That would be commensalism. Commensal interactions are kind of hard to document in nature because any close relationship or association between different species probably has an effect on both of them, but the effect may be pretty small or not easily noticed. Like if you take a look at these water buffalo and cattle egrets, the cattle egrets are getting a benefit. They get the benefit of the grasshoppers and other creatures that the water buffalo kind of bring to the surface. So as the water buffalo are moving through the grass, it causes the grasshoppers and other insects to fly up, and they get the benefit of that. They also get the benefit of a free ride. I mean, they're having to expend no energy to move from place to place. They oftentimes may even pick at flies or other insects that land on the water buffalo. Does the water buffalo mind? Does the water buffalo get any benefit? Probably not really. There may be some instances where maybe the egret eats ticks or other creatures off the water buffalo, and that would be a benefit. But for the most part, it just seems like the water buffalo just don't really care. It doesn't help them, it doesn't hurt them, they just don't really care. So that would be commensalism, where the egret is benefiting and the water buffalo is just neutral. One last form of relationship we might want to look at is called facilitation. Facilitation can be positive positive or positive neutral. It's an interaction in which one species has positive effects on another species without direct and intimate contact. And for the most part, we're talking about plant ecology here. So usually when we think about mutualism, we think about direct interaction. These creatures are very sort of intimate with one another throughout their daily lives, but in plant ecology, sometimes you can have one plant sort of have an indirect effect on other plants. For example, in the book they talk about this black rush, which is a type of plant, makes the soil more hospitable for other plant species, and they even show a graph here. So they show that the salt marsh with the juncus is this particular type of grass in the foreground here, and they show that with and without the juncus the number of plant species change. So for some reason this salt marsh plant has a positive effect on the number of other species that can live in the area. Perhaps it slowly modifies the soil or breaks apart portions of the soil or does something to the soil that allows for the release of certain nutrients. So this plant is not having a direct interaction with other plants, but it's perhaps doing something to the environment that makes it more hospitable for other species. So when it's not a direct interaction, we call that facilitation. And again, this is probably, usually we only really see this in plant ecology. Alright, so we're going to take another quick break. Lots of different relationships there. So mutualism, that can be positive positive or positive negative or positive neutral. There are lots of different varieties of these very close intimate interactions that we see between different creatures. We're going to move on to our next concept, 54.2, and it says diversity and trophic structure characterize biological communities, and we'll discuss a little bit more about that coming up. Take a break, be right back.